remind me, what town had a B-47 like we do?
Lennox does.
Lennox, but there's one north and west of here.
Oh, Lake.
Correct. I called Wall Lake, spoke with the gentleman there. I think he's close to Pat's position for the town of Wall Lake. He had nothing but beautiful things to say about Tachyon, the response time, whole 9 yards. He ditched Vestas a while ago, signed up with Tachyon. I think it had been a year or two he's been doing it with them. Loved it. So, basically the only two options I think we, as the city of Stuart, have is either Tachyon, which is up out of Jefferson, or Vestas, which has not been working out well. Regarding the repower, I spoke with Deutschland Technik about that, and at the end of the day, the juice is really not going to be worth the squeeze on that. The beautiful thing is, with the V47, there are plenty of units still in operation, so there will be ways to find parts and pieces and things like that, but eventually it will run out of its lifespan. So that's what I have to say. I hope that filled in the majority of the gaps.
Thank you.
So would we start these guys when our other contract's up, or can we get out of our other contract? No problem.
We already paid it. It's already been paid in a way through the end of the term. So you just wanna wait until the end of June, and hook up with these guys. And in the meantime, they said they would come down and look at it. So they knew what they were getting into. I just talked to them today. And it's about half the money in a year's time just to have a contract. And when they do come work on it, their mobilization fee is a lot less too. So they wouldn't charge us as much for that. When you look at it, there's a few things they do under this contract. They come in and grease it, and it talks about it. They change filters and things of that nature. And anything else that they see that might be wrong, they tighten nuts, bolts, check voltage, that kind of stuff.
Then how often will they come down and do all that? Only when you call, or it breaks down?
They do
Or
it,
is it monthly, or
they do it twice a year.
twice a year?
And then they, other than that, they only come if I call them and have a problem. And that's the way the contract works now with Vestas. They only really come in between their spring and fall seasons, and
And you said you had a problem with them replying and responding.
it's terrible. The wind turbine's been down there working on it today. It's been down for almost 6 weeks, trying to get them to come work on it.
Gotcha. So this is only a year obligation, so we can try this and.
Yeah, we can try it for a year. If we don't like it, we can get out of it.
Okay.
We pay tax, as much as we, that's tax on here.
Well, the utilities on the electric side, we pay tax.
We have to, right?
Yeah, I think it's the water side that don't pay tax.
Okay.
So with it being down for 6 weeks, is it better if we enact this now and call them because we save more money by calling them versus being down for 6 weeks because they actually reply? I'm just asking.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know that, does it hurt to have 2 contracts if, if it's $7,000 and the other one's double that, we're down for 6 weeks? I mean, what's that generate? I can't remember. It's been so long since we looked at that. What that generates on a monthly basis. But anyway, it's up to you.
You're gonna move it effective July, for instance. Is that what you asked?
I was saying if he's not having good luck now with repairs, it's been down for 6 weeks. If we approve it now, effective now, then he might be saving money by, calling these guys anyway. It's up to you guys. I'm just throwing it out.
Then maybe we'll get it running.
Anyway.
One quick thing, if that turbine does actually bite the big one, it's done, but you guys were actually looking at investing in anything else renewable wise, I would look into solar beyond wind, because the moving parts of wind turbines is just not worth it anymore.
We did check into solar, and it wasn't worth it.
I can't remember what the. Well,
What year was that?
you know what
We're gonna add
our
it.
purchase power contract doesn't allow us to deviate from, I think it was 10% of total contribution, is that right? And so, if the wind turbine was down, we could look at something else to replace the 10%, but it's required that we don't exceed that.
Mhm.
So, and we did try to look at that for sure.
Yeah, I know that, in general, even 2 years ago, solar panels and inverters now are so much more productive than they were just 2 years ago.
Cause
So,
it was just like last year,
Yeah.
that we checked into it.
sure.
Okay. Okay, if you wanna make it effective now, that's fine. Well, it's talking about 2 months.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, we can do it now.
Goes
I'll
down
just-
tomorrow, then you have to call.
Yeah. I told this guy to be calling me back one of these days, one way or another, so.
Is that what we wanna do, start now? That's fine.
Yeah, we can start now.
Yeah. We need a motion. I'll make a motion.
Second? Oh,
Second, I'll come up.
Okay, how do you vote? Crawford?
yes.
Belden?
Yes.
Sherman?
Yes.
AB, yes. DGR Engineering, electric system study update and electric rate review.
Thanks, guys. Right, so thanks again for having us here to talk about the electric infrastructure improvements. And here to basically present an update on our preliminary phase progress. And with that, there's some financial information that we got into and did a little analysis on. So yeah, I guess we'll start. You guys know me, Jared Lucy, on the technical side, kind of the engineering head for Stuart. And then I brought Blair Metzger here. He's longtime financial guru for DGR, a lot of rate studies for municipals and such. So he dug into the financial side, and then of course Chip's here as well. I've been working with him on these financials and stuff. So hopefully I have some good information that you guys will appreciate. And I guess at any time here, just chime in with some questions. We'll just try to hit the high points and get into the details as you guys see fit. So with that overview, like I said, I'm going to go over review the scope of improvements. We had some time to kind of do a preliminary site plan, identify the sort of equipment we want to target for what makes sense to replace and improve upon there at the north substation. And then provide the updated cost estimates for that equipment and give an update on that progress there. So then after that, we'll again touch on financial stuff, looking at rates, looking at some potential savings options as well, as we want to proceed with discussing here. So this set of slides you guys all have ahead of time to look at and review. I thought to kind of put a different picture on this. Literally, I added some pictures of some of the equipment to kind of help with visualizing it. You know, we take for granted as engineers, these objects and these terms are basically daily in our world. So what I want to do is give you guys kind of a contrast of what you have, what you want to get to, and that sort of deal. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully you have time to look at it. But right here, basically we have the existing north substation just on the north side of the dance studio, but more kind of related to actually the water, past water plant and the generation plant. So just in there south of the alley, kind of wedged in there is this existing north substation. I'm just going to point with my clicker here behind you here, but I can maybe use this guy. Yep. So like right up here we have high side 69 kV fuses. Here's the existing transformer here. All this stuff is 69 kV to 4.16 kV. This is all the old voltage. So all of this voltage needs to be stepped down through the switchgear and control panel that's in the power plant. So what we would be looking at here is replacing the big ticket item here in the substation fence. Here is the transformer. The next slide would be, this is the control panel set up for the existing switchgear. That is, I'll show this next slide, but directly above that control panel setup are the 5 kV breakers that are up lofted above the control panel. So really difficult to get at, difficult to work at. I don't know how Pat would go about racking one of those breakers out. They're very difficult. They don't, essentially.
We just don't, it's not safe enough.
Yeah, so just something to point out.
Like
Yeah.
that.
And I don't know, why they did that in the past, just to save space, but anymore, that kind of stuff doesn't really happen unless you have a whole floor to work with for various clearances and operational safety, so. But below it, like I mentioned before here, you got electromechanical relays, this whole lineup. Everything there that we've just shown is vintage early 70s, so it's in that early 50s, 51, 55-year range in there is when this stuff came in and was installed. So just kind of some visual aids for you there. Then here's a view from across the generator on the other side of the plant. You can see how high this stuff is. So it varies from about 10 feet at the base of those breakers to, 17 feet. And then that is all connected to the substation today. And that is all part of what we would be wanting to improve here as part of these improvements. So for contrast, we have your south substation here where, this is essentially a modern design. It was built just shy of year 2000. So there's some nuances. The circuit interrupter looks a little different these days, a little smaller footprint is available. But essentially you have a control enclosure facility, a control building or enclosure type. This will be similar to what goes in there to house the switchgear control panels. This is part of what we would be installing here at the north sub with the proposed improvements. One difference is we don't need this dead end structure. So looking at the existing dead end structure, it makes a lot of sense to just leave the 69 kV terminals and the high voltage dead end in place. Now we will be doing some modifications, getting rid of the old arresters, the old switches on top, and it would be used to just kind of channel the 69 kV conductor into this circuit interrupter here, which then feeds the new transformer. So essentially, these three big ticket items: control enclosure with 15 kV switchgear, 69 kV control panels, circuit interrupter, and the power transformer. And then what you can't see is the switchgear lineup in the building. That is all part of what we would be proposing here for substation modifications to the north sub.
So going back to this one, and when was this one put in?
2000,
So
just shy of 1999.
how is this financed, when was it paid off, and what would the cost of that same facility be today? Would it be what you're looking at?
Pretty close. So this is a greenfield site. It'd be pretty close. 2000 numbers. It was probably you probably did that for $1 million or less. That whole deal.
It was funded by electric revenue bonds.
Yeah, I guess I was just
Okay.
wanting the payback in term and things like that.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, when you say greenfield, it's just an open space.
Yeah. Yep.
Right,
Not-
yes, yeah.
Not the town of Greenfield. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I didn't have it.
These terms, like I mentioned.
Was that structure new at the same time?
Yeah, all that stuff was brand new.
So the work that was being done in that structure stays the same? Or do you have to,
That thing there, we're not touching any of that. That's just an example.
oh,
That's an example of what this is gonna look like, except for we don't need that H structure right here. So contrast, it's really just kind of like 1970s versus the 2000 era. But now there's some control upgrades and things that are, kind of less visible, that are always continuing. The technology is always continuing, and we use the updated versions of everything. But essentially, this old sub includes, switchgear control panels in the plant facility. Is all kind of. We're proposing something that looks more like this, more modern technology, fast interrupting switches on the high side to protect your transformer right away. All these are kind of just the modern technology that is pretty much standard.
It'd be way more efficient too. I mean, with transformer losses. and
Yeah,
things
so we're
like
stepping
that.
it down. We're stepping down the existing north sub stuff. We're stepping it up from 4160 to 12.5 to tie into the rest of the system. So there's losses in that conversion process from 4.16 to 12.5
The way
kV
we do it
distribution.
now, yeah.
Right, so that all goes away. We basically circumvent everything in the north plant there. This is directly gonna be feeding your distribution system in the most efficient manner, so.
Okay, I got a question.
Yeah.
So say we keep the old, if we could keep the old, can we just upgrade parts in it and what's in the other? Would it be cheaper doing it that way or just getting all new?
Yeah, I think it follows, so, the transformer, there's options out there to take and rebuild the existing 1974 transformer. You can rewind it, or you can refurbish it. Vastly different, scales there, to take it and rewind it, recondition it and everything. You're never gonna get quite everything the way you would on a new one, the technology's not there. You have to really invest in it, and then at that point, it's kind of a wash to rewind it and stuff, but ultimately, you'd get a quote for that from like a Solomon or a, if you wanted to go, it'd be considered like a used route. But you don't have the 30 to 40 year lifespan, that would be for a new one. Rule of thumb, I mean, this is just high level, but so you can do that stuff for the transformer. So the switchgear, there's really not much you can do because it's 51 years old. You'd basically be replacing all the panels on the front. To have somebody do that on site would probably be more expensive actually to get a switchgear manufacturer on site versus just having them fabricate a new one in their manufacturing facility, like an HKS or, they tested, they came out and cleaned it and tested it when we did the connection to the tie transformer, so we could have a backup for the time being.
Can you explain, I'm sorry, can you explain it a little bit more in detail what that means?
Yeah, so,
The backup part.
yeah, so right now, so when you buried the rest of the town, right, there's overhead facilities throughout the north part of town. And that was all at the old 4.16 kV distribution voltage. So it's a third of the voltage, so you have 3 times the current and quite a bit more loss, and you can't carry as much load with higher current. Okay, so years ago, you converted that to 12.5 to match the south system. Converted the voltage. Okay. So it was a 4.16 kV system on the north side. This sub here, we're looking at, the south substation is 12.5 kV distribution voltage. So you have 12 kV versus 4 kV, just.
When we still had 4K,
So,
that was after I moved here, and we were having trouble, like, the lights would dim at my house and things like that, and we didn't have good voltage on the.
yeah, it's an old system that was determined to be upgraded, it was old, there's voltage issues with 416.
And this upgrade was where?
So, the whole north part of town here, fed from north plant, that was all converted to 12.5 underground, just converted overhead facilities to underground. The north part of town, that was
I
the
don't,
main.
I don't understand it. The north
Yeah,
side of
because
town was
north
all-
side of town's not underground yet.
The high side, the high voltages.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes,
the
it is.
high
Yeah, it is.
voltages?
Yeah,
Okay, no, we're
Okay.
just talking about the overhead,
Okay.
that's where,
yeah, no, you
Okay.
still got overhead
Thank you.
secondaries and stuff.
no, that's
Yeah.
fine, we're just.
Okay.
And I got an updated cost for you on that as well, for
Okay,
what that would take to bury the remainder.
Gotcha.
So, sorry,
No,
like I
that's
said, these
fine.
terms,
That's-
it's like, I see them every day, so it means something to me and not
That's
you guys, so.
we gotta be able to explain this to our neighbors, that's
Exactly,
at
so.
least a little bit.
I'm trying to be precise and break it down here. So, when you converted underground to 12.5, you still needed to step up the voltage to match the underground 12.5 system in the south part of town. So with that, we have a tie transformer that we connected to the power plant switchgear, that switchgear that's up in the air. So you had a backup to the south sub until you guys did something further with the north sub. So it's basically the breaker coming out of the switchgear is rated for 600 amps at 4160, which is 4 megawatts. It's like the max capacity for that tie to feed the distribution system if something happens to the south sub.
So what, and again, ballpark, what year would have this been?
So when did we do the north? It was 2018.
2017.
2017, 18, all that was buried underground.
And that was the bond issue?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, correct. So that's the tie, okay? So the power plant today is feeding a tie transformer to step it up to the 12.5 voltage that feeds the whole town. This power transformer at the north sub, that old one I showed you, it's 4.16, so it's the lower voltage that we have to step up. So there's a there's a loss calculation there in the tie transformer that's there. Not only, just go to it here.
So,
So this transformer right here is at 4 kV, we'll say. It's gotta be stepped up to the tie transformer to feed the distribution system, and it's all connected. And that is all right over here, south of the plant building. So,
and is this just a confined mess of space to be able to work within, that there's no place to expand? And we should look, like, the south side was put together for a reason, I'm sure, but it was out, open and green space. Should that be being looked at here as well? And the north, I'm just.
it's a great point. Yeah, it's a great point. So, we did have, kind of working with Pat and the team, like, they have ideas of where it could go. And one of the critical things is you don't wanna have to rebuild a bunch of transmission. So these terminals here is the 69 kV. So the tall poles right outside the sub here. So the nice part about the north sub site here is that you don't have to touch the transmission or that dead end. So that's what we looked at is for like cost savings. However, there are some other options probably that we gotta dig into as part of this preliminary phase where, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you every day, the greenfield site, awesome. And it's just a matter of finding it along the transmission where you don't have to rebuild a bunch of, 300,000 per mile, transmission line. So that's kind of the benefit of going where we are today. We kind of show the site plan here, I can, right here, okay. So in part of our preliminary phase here is figuring out, hey, can we make this work space-wise? So we did check-in and clearances. I mean, it's very tight here today. You're looking at essentially 5 feet to the edge of the fence on each side of the structure. Pretty condensed. So what we've laid here is a proposed possible scenario where this equipment, what we just showed at the south sub, can be fit in here, assuming that this site is available, and assuming that there's some underground utilities here and some old structures that we need to dig into a little bit to see how much it'll cost to relocate some of them. So this site is great when it comes to transmission. It's right here. We can save costs on this. We can keep this existing structure. Okay.
It won't limit us, it wouldn't be a limitation down the road. I mean, we're just talking about space or not being a safe environment for repairs earlier. Will this be the same thing because it's in a tight location, I guess?
Not same, but appreciate the insight appreciate the comment because, yeah, this is an ideal. I mean, you've got an alleyway with pedestrians and folks that are in and around here. So is it ideal? No, but it can feasibly work if we can't find a better spot along the transmission. So if you go straight to the northeast there, we were just kind of speculating on maybe kind of a more or less vacant spot that's right on the transmission that I think can work to see if that's going to be available to purchase. It takes a little bit of visiting with people to see what's available, to
That's the
procure.
circle, is that what you're getting at?
So if you go,
Oh, sorry.
so if you go like straight up this way, across the road,
Okay.
this transmission
Oh, sorry.
line kind of goes a block and it goes up this way and it weaves down the dot over here. It kind of weaves up north, okay? If we can find a spot along that transmission line that is available, the property's available, yeah, I'd recommend putting it there. But it takes a little bit of prospecting, if you will. You gotta talk to people to see what's available. We kind of looked at a site a few years ago and there was some discussions had, staff and everything, like, no, let's just see if we can make it work here to save money, basically, I think was the plan.
Okay.
Is that how it kind of went, Pat? See if we can do it
Yeah.
here to save some money?
Yeah, it would be cheaper just to do it where it's at, but if it's not feasible, then we have to.
Yeah, so,
Jared, can I say something?
yeah, you bet.
So they've got a spot identified for a new substation to replace the north sub. But nobody has talked to the property owner, so I think just know that. I don't know that you want to mention the site yet, and then.
Yeah, I don't necessarily
There's
want to.
been no discussion, so.
So,
When you say the transmission line, where is that?
yeah, so like right along, the east side of the plant here, I think I'm pointing in the right direction here, but yeah, the east side of the plant, so the transmission terminals there, you can kind of see these guys right here, okay? These are the high wires, we'll call them. they go across the road, then they go north a block and a half, and then they go east another block. So they're the tall vertically stacked 69 kV wires. And they have,
Majority of it's hidden in the alleys, so you don't really see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's down the valley.
Yeah, it's most of
and it's kind of up there, and so it's not in your
And
line of
be
sight.
over-
so.
Like Brian.
Running down North Sherman.
But there's no city property in that general area that would suffice for something like this.
Cause it would come down where you used to live and then go over, and that would hit North Sherman.
It runs from the tennis courts all the way down to French Church, then goes around Smalls down to Archie Jones.
Past Albertus and.
Yeah.
Right.
in front of Dick's house.
So really, if you can find a spot along there, it's
North
nice. Otherwise, you're
Donate your
rebuilding.
front yard, Mayor.
It's across the street from me.
Otherwise, you're building transmission. Well, SIPCO owns that transmission, so you got to go through them, and that's another process. So a lot of reasons for avoiding transmission build out.
Okay.
So that's the main reason.
Good to know.
I
Yeah,
got one
it's-
question.
Yeah, but
The switch gear, are you gonna plan on putting a building if you put it over here, just like the south one?
similar. Yeah, so it'd be
Like that.
similar, not as big. We got to be.
But you own ground this way, right, Pat?
Yeah.
To the west?
It's to the west.
Yes, so we'd be taking it, kind of just bringing the site, the fenced site with this
Right.
building, kind of to the edge of that,
Straight to the west. and where-
straight to the west, yep, about 55 feet in all. And then that way, what kind of drives it is the operational clearances. So if you can get 20 feet in between that transformer and the control building, that's ideal. You can even bring
You
that
can
in.
get that for what you're.
Yeah, this year is all scaled. That's kind of what we've been working on, is just trying to make sure stuff. Before we're like, hey, let's do it, you gotta make sure it fits. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at. But these are real dimensions. If you had an engineer's scale, you could scale it off and it all kind of works. So, the other nice part about this is that, for what it's worth, constructability, we can mostly construct this stuff without disconnecting the stuff today. So you got it as a backup if you need it. There is a point of no return, however, once you start installing equipment, then you gotta do the cutover, and then you don't have to back up for the construction timeframe. So, nice part about Greenfield is cutovers, just getting the transmission hooked in, everything is ready to go.
So in essence, if we just built the same structure someplace else, we would have 3 substations?
For a little while,
Capacity,
yeah,
Or you
yeah.
still wanna decommission the old one?
You'd probably be away with this just because you're gonna be sitting fine with the new site, capacity wise and just operationally. But you could certainly keep it running as long as you wanted to, as a third
Well, that's-
backup.
that's
And
what I'm
minus-
I don't know if SIPCO would let us have 3.
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
that's a good point.
I got a question too, like I was asking Pat, if we were, like in the winter time, if our electricity goes out, after a certain amount of time, they'll kick it on. And do you guys still kick it in, the old thing down here?
We run the generators outside. We go out there and start.
Okay. Because I don't wanna lose that,
No, that,
because we're about the only town around here that has that capability.
No, it's great, yeah, that's 100%, you got a good setup there with the generation. Keep that as long as you can, I mean, that's all pretty, the generation came after this substation.
So
They added the gens there.
That was made in 2017, why didn't this get done then? If that was paid off in 99 substation, why didn't? Or was it
cost,
looked
right,
at-
just the cost
So then
thing. I know that
It'd be
it,
paid off by now. Well, not paid off, but maybe
That's-
the interest rate.
that's what I'm saying, it's so, like, time is so, that's why in 10 years, it just keeps building, so probably was a cost thing, honestly. So didn't wanna,
Take the whole building down, but that costs you.
And so
which I'll understand.
we kind
But we
of
can
estimated the 99
scrap. and have people-
substation at $1 million, the current one you're proposing is about 5.
If you can get enough money.
So, yeah, this guy here, I guess I'll just.
I mean, I was just looking at your total costs on your page.
Yeah.
10 of 19 was 5, right?
So back in 2000, and I'd have to really go back and, don't hang me up on that 1 million,
No, that's
that's
fine.
completely pot shot there.
Swag, that's fine.
Yep, but it's cost us significantly risen since then. I mean, even 5 years ago, for example, a power transformer of this size 5 years ago was for sure under $1 million, probably $650,000 to $750,000. Five
Now
to
it's
7 years ago.
1.5 is what you're saying.
Yeah, now it's 1.5, and that should be healthy. That's a healthy budget number. We'd be bidding that, so we would obviously expect to maybe save, but that there is just for the transformer. The construction contract, expansion of the site, adding, we'd be replacing the existing fence for safety personnel reasons. We'd want to maybe add a foot to that fence, probably put razor wire on the top because of the kind of more urban environment. Rocking, fencing, site expansion. Those items, the construction contract we have at 1.36 is an estimate. Control enclosure with the control panel and the, there we go. So the control enclosure with control panels and switchgear, so that building, that kind of steel looking building there, around $850,000. The circuit interrupter with motor operated switch integrated with protection controls of the transformer, that's around $135,000 conservatively. Then we had just some minor updates to the steel structure, steel arresters, station power work there, kind of more minor items, but then we have the distribution interconnection stuff. So really at the end of the day, if we can use that existing site and the relocation of some of the utilities back there isn't too bad. With some healthy contingencies in here yet, we're at about 4.8, 4.9 in there. So again, like I said, we've got healthy contingencies in here, 850 of engineering and contingencies. Most of that would probably come off if everything goes as designed.
What's the contingency percentage of the budget? Is it 10% or?
Yeah, contingencies, engineering, 10% each, roughly. So,
Okay.
but once we get a plan and once you guys, then we work on our engineering costs, see what it takes, and
Okay.
present an amendment at that time. So,
What does having a limited footprint do for future growth and demand? 20 years down the road, if we're limited now on that footprint, is it a third substation that we might have to go? Or if we built on a bigger footprint now, I mean, how does that work?
yeah, no, great question. You guys be pretty comfortable capacity-wise if we just did that footprint for a long time. You'd have to double, triple size of town. But there's really not much expansion going on there at the north plant. So we're maxing it out, right, for the next 50 years. If you do a greenfield site like you did, like at South Sub there, and you found a nice spot, then you could set it up for an additional transformer potentially. So that would where expansion could be possible, depending on what that site looks like.
I still am not following the difference or the cost savings of staying where we're at. I mean, is there a way to put a ballpark on there if you're able to locate the site as, has been brought up and it's, the hallmark card of fees to make that happen, because I mean, what you're saying is long-term, it makes more sense to have a separate place than where we're at.
Yeah, if you have the site available.
Yeah.
So the difference would be, some modest, if you're on the transmission line, so if you could just drop tabs from that, you got probably 30,000 in transmission modifications. The cost of the substation site, the parcel, okay?
Land acquisition.
Yeah, land acquisition, 30 grand there. You'd have a little bit more of a build, you'd build it out a little bit better, so you'd have some storage space and everything. You're probably, the 5.1 that I did have there last time.
Yeah.
4.8. $200,000 to $300,000
Okay.
is the difference, and that's because we kind of focused on the site, but we've got 450,000 in contingencies. So these are good numbers.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with these numbers, whether or not we go to a new site or not. But the devil's in the details there, and it really depends on where the site is, how much that land costs. That's the biggest thing.
So
You also have to tie into distribution, both sides.
That's
Farther away you get, the harder it gets.
Yeah.
say that again.
You have to bring all your distribution circuits back to tie into your.
I don't know what that means, I'm
So
sorry.
so the underground lines, yeah.
Your 12.5 circuits that go underground.
So you're gonna have to run those out to the
Yep.
system.
You have to come back from a remote site to tie into those, which adds cost.
Okay.
And we have some of that in here, we have some duck bank and stuff in there, so,
But we have to do that on the south side, right?
well, yeah, at one point you did,
Okay.
yep, at one point you did, years ago, so.
Is that stuff we can do ourselves?
That's asking a lot.
That's big stuff. and-
It is, if
Lots
we're
of
gonna
multiple
pour the
circuits.
concrete duct banks and things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe this is maybe naive and uninformed, but do some towns our size just have one larger station?
Yeah, there's folks that, if they don't have transmission, you just have one substation, right?
And that's
So
what
you
I
guys have,
understand.
this, I would say, wonderful transmission assets that most communities, if they had 2 transmission sources, they love that. So usually it's, they don't wanna build the transmission out. So, yes, some do. Some just have one and they call it good. They don't have that redundancy. When we do a study, if they have transmission nearby, we would say, hey, you should build some transmission and get another substation. You know, that's how we would look at that. It's the contingency. Like, we think you need to be able to back up your major equipment with another, because things do happen, right? You wanna have at least N-1 contingency of your system.
What a lot of electric utilities have done, where if they only have one transmission source, the more sophisticated ones, they bring in a second source, so that if that one source goes down, you still have power for the whole town. You guys already have that.
So just,
Cause I asked Pat, why couldn't we just add on to the south? Keep this
So why
one
doesn't that work?
the way
Yeah,
it
Good
is,
question.
and just add on to the south.
I bet
Wouldn't
you're-
that be
I bet-
cheaper?
I bet you're-
you could do that, but then you don't have your transmission source.
Well, if you've still got this
We
one,
have 2
run this
now, and we
one.
just have 1, is that what we go to, or what?
Oh, okay, so you're
This
saying
one's not
keeping this,
adequate.
the older plant here.
Just leave it alone, add on to the other one?
Just leave this one alone for right now and add on to that one. How
So-
far would that get us?
Isn't
And
it-
how
You're not
much?
gonna save much money.
You got distribution issues, to get circuits back up here from there to tie into your existing distribution up here.
Cause you have an age and a capacity issue over here, and then you've got a linkage issue if you just go out over there.
Correct.
You're gonna spend the same
Okay.
money down there anyway, plus in the.
Yeah, you're not gonna save money with just expanding the south stuff because you would,
You got the same equipment.
the same equipment would be there, but you're just radial from the transmission. Plus you'd have additional distribution out to tie in again, kind of redundant circuitry. And then and then the north would still be old and potential.
So that one's not built to add on to that. I mean, I think what you're asking is, shouldn't it be easier to add on to a newer one? Than
Right,
try to rip out everything out of an old one?
Right.
Fix it up to make it confined to the same space we have now. The one in 99, was it built to add on to?
Yeah, I mean, you've got plenty of space down there to do it, but it's really a schematic situation. It's schematic where it doesn't get you that N-1 contingency because you still are radial on the transmission. So, yeah, I see what you're saying.
It takes you back to one place where the power's coming from instead of having 2.
So, so for example, if the south substation transformer goes down, okay, you would need to get transmission to the new substation, right? So yeah, that condition, you're backed up, but if something happens to the transmission, you're still reliant on the north plant for that feed of the town, but entire community, yes.
What we're running into is we've grown so much that this substation, on a hot day or a really super cold night, it won't handle it by itself. It won't handle the whole town by itself. It's just not big enough anymore.
Yeah, so hope I'm trying to answer your questions best I can with my
Maybe that's where I was getting
engineer
at,
terms.
the future demand. If one goes down, is this one being made better now? Still going to be able to handle, that contingency plan if one goes down for a while and.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, 100%. We would design it. We're not really just brushing it up. We're replacing the key components. So we're
So
replacing
this
all
isn't
this stuff.
refurbished then?
This is not refurbished.
Okay,
This
it's
is
not.
brand new.
Okay.
I kind of brought up
And
refurbished
large
because
and larger.
What's that?
I brought up refurbished. She asked if you could kind of make it nice, right? Make
Right.
the existing. You
This
can,
would be
but
a
you-
larger transformer up
Yeah,
there.
this-
The switchgear would all be, well, of course, it'd be brand new and it would be larger, higher amperage and everything like that. So if we did have a problem on the south side, we could carry the whole town.
yeah,
Of the
easily,
new substation.
easily with future load growth.
So if there's a problem on the north side, can the south side carry the entire town? with the current-
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, yeah, south side, if you had two south subs, you'd be fine till the south sub transformer gets. So that's what we're trying to replicate, is trying to have, so you're not, all your eggs are in one basket.
It's not very many towns that have the opportunity that they're tapped to their supplier twice, and we are.
Right.
So
You have
that's
that
what we're trying
infrastructure.
to take advantage of that.
Yeah, to turn away that redundancy there is something that would cost towns millions to have. Just that existing transmission line, it's valuable, very valuable, so. And I should mention that, larger commercial or industrial outfits see that, they know if the town's got redundant feeds, they know that stuff, because it increases the likelihood that they won't have an outage. So that really helps benefit wise, so really here, just for the sake of your guys' time and everybody here, I just want to kind of keep rolling. Any other questions on that, on the technical side of it?
I'm not sure I understand the first number, 1.36 million, that says construction contract, site expansion fence, all that stuff, and then the 848 that says control enclosure. Those are two separate items.
Control enclosure is a building with.
Yeah, so what's the first one? What's the
It's a
construction?
site expansion, the fence, rock.
That's the construction contract, so you're gonna have a contractor come in and install all this stuff. So you guys are buying these.
I was just thinking of it from an expense perspective. To me, it's not, maybe it's the titling that it says site expansion fence, rock, cable, and duct. Does not make any sense that it should cost $1.4 million. That's what I'm getting at. I get what you're saying about the control enclosure being $848,000. That's a building. I get that. I'm missing something in the parentheses.
That's
of
the
that.
labor, that's also the labor for all the work that goes involved.
Yeah,
Goes into the
so that should
construction
say
or all of it. Okay.
all of it. This should say all labor.
Okay, no, that's fine.
That's a typo. This is all the labor, this is the lineman, the contractor
Yeah.
that's installing all this. So yeah, that's a good
I'm just
question.
saying I didn't understand that.
No, detailed question. Anything else on that, guys?
So if each one can power the town on its own, what are the benefits of, besides just the redundancy and, contingency of what one fails and you have the other to operate for a time, but aren't you then overbuilding, to have multiples that can run the whole town?
There's been times,
Are we oversized? Is that what you're asking? I could be.
there's been times where Sitco is trimming trees and they'll kill that line.
Right.
And we do have to carry the whole town.
Right.
Or they're doing work out south edge of town and they'll kill that. And then on top of that, when we go to do our relay testing and they rack out all the breakers, we kill out that south sub completely. So they get in there, they're tightening up bolts that haven't been tightened up in 10 years,
Right.
And we can carry the whole town. If we didn't have that, you can't really run generators because everything's gotta be fed through that bus.
I'm just curious, so beyond that, which is great, which I think we need, when they're both running and, things are running smooth, does it, because they're both running at lower capacity or whatever, does that
That's
elongate the life of each one?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We have lower current on the transformers and that will lead to a longer transformer life. Yep.
So to your point, we're not at excess capacity, or we're overusing or whatever, stressing our, we're not currently, right?
Well,
Both are working fine?
we're due to have the relays tested this year, I believe.
What does that, you gotta tell me what that means, 'cause I'm.
All the relays that their protection over current.
Okay.
Like, say a line hits the ground
Mhm.
or somebody digs into it, it'll kill the circuit
Okay,
hopefully before severe damage or life or limb, so they come in and test them every 5 years.
okay.
Pat, you wanna?
Yeah, so
Well,
it's really.
we're getting close to needing them
Yeah.
tested again.
And
So,
those-
I don't know if it's next year or
Those
the
at the
year
north
after,
side are
but
older than me.
Right.
And old.
So you have 4 megawatts you can run through the existing north plant, 4 megs.
Okay.
Your guys' peak. was
3.8.
3.9 something without the Quick Star
That was without
and
Quick Start.
without Travel America.
Yeah.
That's why
Without
we're
any-
concerned, that's why I wanna be ahead of it. We don't want you to
That's
be,
just one though, that's only looking at one as your capacity though, right?
if you have both available,
But they are both available what percentage of the time? I'm just trying to say,
The point of it is you don't want to live with just one thing. You gotta be able to have one of them down and still serve the whole town.
but we
You
just,
have to have that.
but we just talked about, we're very unique, that most towns don't have that availability though, right? With one down and the other one working.
No, I, well,
Say
it's not-
most,
the
some.
he's talking about the transmission source in here, not the substation.
not the substation.
Okay.
I've lived in towns where we didn't have that option, and when one went down, we sat in the dark until they got it fixed.
And you don't want to go there.
And then we'd sit in the dark some nights for hours. And to have two sources here to feed it, that's great, because you don't have to sit in the dark.
Yeah, so did we kind of all answer, did we try? We tried.
We're getting closer.
That's fine. That's fine, so,
Thanks for your patience.
no problem, you probably have the same questions.
I mean, we gotta be able to explain this to, you know,
Absolutely, yep.
neighbors and whoever else we talk to.
So our key focus is the substation stuff, and so phase 2 improvements down the road, eventually, you need to be able to work on these, bolstering the distribution in the south. That's something that, it's not critical mass, we're not overloading anything down there. That's long-range plan, okay, so, for what it's worth, we're focused on the substation, it's not critical mass there in the south side, so but we did want to include, it's part of the study, part of what we called out is potential, things to plan for. And so that cost, we kind of looked at what's the bare minimum we can do here in the next 10, 15 years, and we think if you guys keep seeing load, et cetera, like $800,000. So we hacked quite a bit off of this just to try to focus on the north-south. So you guys would question me about what it would cost to bury the remaining secondary overhead. The secondary, it's right around $850,000. So
You know what, really?
just for what it's worth there.
You catch that? That was, so all the north buried is, so just, and that's ballpark, but that does not
Yeah, we
involve
looked at
any,
all the
that does not, that's just to the house, that wouldn't be to the house, it would be to the,
That's to the house.
so how would that factor in? How does that work? I don't.
Yeah, so you got a second, so from the
So then
second,
we
from
would
the
include some of that because you'd assess people, or how does that? Oh, I don't mean, I'm talking to the actual physical box inside of a. Oh, here's the, there you go.
Up to the meter, yeah, that's what we looked at, is we get a meter cut over contract, and you would
And that's
have a
this.
contractor come in and help basically bury those underground lines.
Mhm.
City would be, or municipal would be able to wreck out the old overhead stuff. And the side note.
Personalized question to me.
Yeah. No problem.
19.
You mentioned, that we would reduce loss with this new higher efficiency, new technology and stuff. Is that quantifiable in,
Yeah, so you're losing about, I'd say probably anywhere from 5 to 6% because of the tie transformer. You're removing that voltage transition out of the equation.
So what's that, the dollar value loss?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I could look at that and give you
I mean, is
guys.
it measurable next to $5 million?
I
Is it-
think Blair's got it.
Well, yeah, it's not, it's certainly something, but it's not enough to pay for the.
No, not paid for,
No,
but is there a
It's quantified.
year,
Your-
5% recoup?
Your losses are higher than you would see if your whole system was fit directly at 12.5, because you got that extra step up process. And so, couple percent, so, I mean, you have to run the numbers here. I don't know if that's $20,000 a year, maybe, just a ballpark number.
And it depends on how much you're running through the north plant, which you kind of avoid because it's older. And so,
We do now, but if we had a new one, we'd use it.
yeah, you would balance it 50-50.
Right.
So you would have each transformer very low loads. So overall, we got, the updated cost here is 5.6 million for phases 1 and 2. That includes the distribution. We're gonna continue to flush out some of the things at the north site here. We're gonna look at maybe the other site we were talking about, to see what that costs as well. We can run those numbers as part of this preliminary phase. We're not done yet with preliminary. This isn't the end here. We got a few details to work out before we can really finalize things. And then I guess the key thing here is that we want your guys' buy-in on what you're doing, and we want your guys' satisfaction. So if we need to look at anything like a new greenfield site, we certainly can. We're contracted to look at that. Really, we're just here to answer your questions, and I guess.
The two numbers there, Jared.
I got a question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so say we do phase one now. So 10 years down the road, can we wait and do phase two?
If that worked better for you guys'
Or
cash
15
situation.
years down the road, or,
Depends on what your load growth is and how long.
Depends on load growth. It depends on, every year we look at the loads, and that's what we're tracking.
Now it's a 3.9 you're talking about.
So, Kim,
Yeah, if it keeps going, you need to probably do that stuff sooner, we need to look at that.
So if the south is running all by itself, what's the capacity on
The South Substation?
Yeah.
7 MVA,
it? Okay, and this one's 4.
this one's 4.
Okay.
The transformer is a little bit more than the tie connection, but you're bottlenecked by the switchgear at 600 amps, that's at 4 megawatt, and the cable. So it's all kind of working together there. But yeah, South Sub, you're good, 7 MVA, got plenty of growth
And
there.
this replacement would be a 7.5.
We would probably go a little higher because it doesn't cost that much more. If you're doing a transformer, you get as much capacity for the money, and we bid alternate sizes to see what makes sense. So,
I don't think you have to wait that long. So what we've assumed with the bond issue, he had 4,865,000 as a new estimate. That's in the large handout that was in your packets. I assumed 5.1 million for the bond issue, so I'm high, I'm conservative. Then the phase two, it's funded with what Blair's gonna go over, it's funded from cash of the electric fund, no financing. And it's funded in the time period shown, I think
well,
20
what I'm getting at,
27 to 28.
we got 40 years on the water mains. Now we're working on this. I don't want to get full in debt. I mean, that's me. Because I don't want the rates to go up.
Okay,
Because we told them on this franchise fee, that would help and we would not raise the rates.
So since you guys were here since you were here the last time, there was a petition from the public with the concern related to franchise fee that the city council had approved, we had asked them to consider. And so it was the concept that franchise fee would help with some shared cost savings passed back or shared. And so that was 5%. So as you look at rate increases, there's already been, in anybody's mind, a 5% rate increase. Oh, we're already paying 1, fair, okay.
Yeah.
But that's our side, so that, you guys have already got that built into your Excel file, I've already seen it, I get that. I'm just saying there's been a lot of public feedback that, we need to do a better job of sharing information, being transparent, and reminding people. So I guess, actually, before I forget, if we can put all of this stuff on a website, on Facebook, I don't care where, but there's a lot of good information here, and we'll, give everybody an idea of what the costs are. And then there's that one page out of the presentation from July, August, September, whatever that was, that shows that trending consumption, or trending piece. That, yeah, that one page. And I mean, that's the story right there. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? That tells everybody where things are at. So, I mean, what Kim's getting at is folks' feedback was, why would we raise this rate and then just not raise utility rates in essence? And so, we've got a mix of RECs on both sides of the community, and Stuart Utility is kind of boxed in the middle of that. So that's where that's coming from. So, I mean, your highlighted yellow is 10%, but it's truly 15 in the eyes of, everybody in town. So.
Kim, I got one quick question. When you mentioned burying the underground, run it up to the meter, but it's up to the homeowner to hook up to the electric box, right? To change over the whole panel.
Pat will have to, what's your guys' typical agreement? I'm not familiar with how you guys do your cutovers.
That would be normal. We don't tie it over or anything.
Well, and that's what I'd ask. Sometime we need to see about a grant or whatever, or a timeline, because we don't want buried underground and say, well, you got 10 years to hook it up to your house.
What was done last time? Wasn't there a time window given and people were allowed to pay that portion?
Before you had to have a licensed electrician.
Well, you gotta have a licensed electrician to do it now. If you're gonna go into the house, and we gave people 90 days to get it that far, and we also gave them a year to pay for it.
Okay, so there's parameters around that you'd set, but
Yeah,
your point is you wouldn't wanna do one without the other, right? 'Cause
No,
it's a waste of
no,
money. I agree,
because you
yeah.
don't wanna run up me and say, well, you got 10 years to do it, you need to have a timeline.
You gotta make them do it or.
Right.
Yeah.
It never
That
happened.
850,000 or so, did you say that included?
So there's a couple of things going on there. So the 850 I showed for phase 2 was for improvements to the south circuits because there's some undersized.
Well, I'm asking about that other number, you gave
Okay.
us to bury the.
So they're similar numbers, that's why I'm making the
Correct.
clarification. So that one was like under 800, we did some estimating and found the secondaries, the blocks, and we estimated the number of secondaries. And basically get the secondaries buried up to a point, I'm not sure where that is, depending on your guys' typical agreement, $850,000 to $875,000 to have a contractor come in and finish that work. So I don't know if that includes, I think that includes up to the meter, but I don't know. Pat.
Well,
I gotta
in the
talk to the
alley-
house.
But in the alley, we put the meter pedestals in the alley, so does it?
Okay.
From that.
Okay.
Onto the house, or does it stop there?
I'll ask that question. My designer looked at it, he's familiar with the city.
It makes sense that it would not, because I wouldn't know how you size that, right? I mean, some people,
Everybody's would be a little different.
Agreed, a little different, yeah.
well, maybe there's a guesstimate, I don't know.
And maybe we had funds in there, but, you know,
Sure.
so.
And we've been working with Coon Valley's contractor when they were boring the fiber optic to just go ahead and put our interduct in with, that way we don't have to work around them, they don't have to work around us, but if that would, Coon Valley probably doesn't sound like they plan on being on the north side of town this summer yet, but if they are, we try to work with them.
So you're saying that might be a cost savings, we could blend?
Yes.
I got you.
But
Things were together.
it's not a all-in-one done in a summer, it's like however much they plan on. And-
Gotcha.
But it worked out well last summer for what they did, which was pretty much everything from like cell barn up to the Oddfellows.
Okay.
And Second Street was as far as they went, they didn't.
Okay, but, so if they don't do that, we've got a bore machine, so why can't our employees do it?
We could.
Cause that would save us money there too.
Fair point.
So if they're not gonna be, over in that area.
But it's, yeah, when you make the bore and you can pull back two conduits together instead of having to make two separate boards.
Right,
So when we've made a board, we've pulled back conduit for them. We haven't done that much, but there's
mine's
not,
done,
yes, yours.
mine's done at my house. Cause we did it when we built the garage. So,
Okay, let's talk about how you're gonna pay for all this.
Yeah.
That's a really important
Financial.
part of this. This is the key, it needs to be done, it has to be done, we know what it's gonna cost, so now how you get paid for it and do it in a way that is handleable by the customer. So, little background here, in 2017, 2018, they did a rate study for the community. Some of you were around then, remember seeing me then, worked with Chip on that, we did the original financing. Since that time, I've updated the financial model. I've got a pretty decent model there, pretty strong model that helps us look at these kind of things. So what I did in order to figure out what this means to the customers, I updated that with these projects that we've been talking about tonight. So we're gonna focus on the substation. We're not gonna worry about the south $800,000 project. We're gonna push that off to the side. That isn't the important thing right now, is how do we do that substation? We're talking somewhere in that 4.95, let's call it $5 million to make it easy. So here are the sources that we're gonna use for that. You've actually got some unspent funds from the 2017 bond issue that are still available, that are still in your bank account. It's actually 790,000, I think is what the audit said. We assumed 750 last week before we had the audit. So you have that available. You've got some good reserves right now. You've got roughly $3 million of reserves that you can draw down somewhat. We don't want to use all of that by any means, but there'd be no problem to use $1.5 million of that to put toward the project. And then, the balance of it would be new debt, that's what Chip, is working on, roughly 2.85 million around numbers. And again, that'll depend on where we end up with the total project size. So that bucket there would be how you come up with money. The existing 2017 debt, as we looked at this, we said, let's roll that in there and put it all together and refinance the whole thing. So you don't have two different outstanding debt issuances, you just have one. And so that will be rolled into this. As part of that, is a debt service reserve account of $400 and some thousand that can be released that we can use for this project as well. So that's built into this. And so we've tried to tweak this plan to make it so that it's at least objectionable to people, if you will, or at least impactful to people. Obviously, we try to move things out as far as we can and try to set this up so that the payments were spread out as best we can here to make the impact as light as possible.
What's happened to the 2017 debt that makes you want to roll it into the other one? Is it just payment structure?
You're releasing the reserve fund, that's the benefit that you get from refunding it. So you get to apply that 417,000 reserve fund, you don't have to keep it on your books anymore.
What's that reserve fund? How's that calculated? Is it percentage?
It's
of
one
debt?
year's debt service on the 2017 debt.
So it's just part of the reserves. Is that part of the 3 million calculation?
No,
It's
that's,
applied to buy down the refunding, so it reduces the amount of debt.
that's currently in a restricted.
So it can't
You
be
can't
classified
spend
as
it.
reserves. It's called something else because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of your current cash, but cannot be spent.
Part of what you see in the financial statement, this whole.
It's part of the 4, part of the 4 million, I
Yes,
think.
it
Right.
is.
But I think sometimes it's easy just to skirt over things, but I'm gonna call out Ash on this because I think it's something he does a very good job of and it doesn't get said enough. That the reason we can sit here and have these discussions is because we've got a strong financial picture in our reserves. He's, that petition came forward, we put our scorecard out there of utility rates, tax rates, and water rates and the trends of those. I think they've, you can take the personality out of things, but you can never argue with math. And I mean, it shows some steady performance. I'm just gonna bring that up.
I agree.
Okay, I got a question too.
Yes.
So you're looking at these places, have you checked into any grants
Okay,
that we could go for?
we're gonna talk a little bit later. Jared's gonna talk about that. a little bit
Okay.
later. Grants, well, there are grants, but I don't know, we haven't figured out how to get them. They just
Well,
aren't available.
I Googled it, you Googled
I
it
found that
too.
low.
I'm talking about actually getting them, not
Right.
applying for them.
Right,
And actually getting them. It's really been a challenge. We've tried that a lot of places. There's been very few that have actually been successful, sort of
You
grant.
see so much more grant dollars for water and sewer projects, it's hard to get them for electric. It's just, the federal government policy, I think, is what largely drives a lot of that. There's just limited monies available for electric.
If we could get that 2% money on the short term, not
That's-
4 years,
that's-
15 to
that's-
20%, that may be more than a grant. I mean, it could.
That's where we have.
That's a big nugget.
Well, and Jared will talk about that in a little bit. But for right now, we're assuming we can't get that. We're gonna keep trying.
Can't get a grant more than 2%?
Right.
Okay.
For the sake of this discussion.
Sure.
And if we can, it'll help, it'll just help, so. Long story short, built all this into the model and looked at what it would take to make this all work. What I mean by that is to keep sufficient unrestricted reserves and also to make debt service coverage, which debt service coverage is what the real driver of this is. In other words, you have to have enough cash generated from the utility to make your debt service payments. And so that's the real driver of all this as it turned out. You can see on the screen there, it's also in a lot of the information that was handed out. We're looking at a series of very minor rate increases over the next 5 years is what it would take to make this work. Starting with the 2.5% this summer, fiscal 26, 3 years of 2% increases and then a 1% in fiscal 30. So very modest increases there over the next 5 fiscal years.
This would not include any SIPCO forest rate increases, just for business as usual activity, right? I mean, this-
So I built in inflation factors in all of my estimates as well as what I know from SIPCO, what they're saying for rate increase.
They seem like a pretty good partner.
We don't know, for sure what it will be, but we've got that built in.
They
We know.
I was So they seem pretty steady.
They really will.
So I guess long story short, if we do that set of, increases that I have shown there, that we'll have the sufficient funds to do the project, we'll be able to maintain the debt service coverage. And the good news is your unrestricted reserve balance will still grow. It'll bounce back from where it would be if we draw it down and still be a really nice number at the end of that. Even if you do the phase 2 distribution project that we're saying we're gonna leave off to the side. We can decide that later. If you don't wanna do that, then the unrestricted reserve would still be good. So it's a really strong financial thing here if we do the plan that we currently have.
But
Shown.
here we're raising the rates to the people. It's gonna be, by the time we do the 4% with that fee and 9% here, that's gonna be 13% in 5 years.
Yep.
That we're raising and hitting the town people.
So, well, I know that one thing that a lot of the town people mentioned to me is they feel like the city should pay a utility bill.
Yes, that's been brought up.
And I don't know what, I think the number I heard at that meeting, I think Ash brought up was like, it's about 32,000 a year. I don't know how that would relate to a percent increase.
I'm personally vehemently opposed to that because I think the city and the utilities work well together, just like this franchise fee deal. And, you know, I mean, you could argue the same thing. We pay 100% health insurance. Why don't we cut it down to 50%? You probably save more money doing that than.
But you're putting it all on, you're really putting it all on the Stuart municipal electric customers rather than all the citizens in town to pay the city's utility bill. And because I'm not paying it now.
Right.
And you're not.
I'm not either. No.
And that's why I'm saying, I think that's why we should probably do that, because how many towns in the state of Iowa don't pay a utility bill? I mean, can anybody name one?
But isn't there a payment to, like a pilot back to the city for economic development in lieu of that, so they pay them?
A lot of cities do a payment in lieu of taxes that can be either a flat amount, often it's a percentage of the gross electric fund revenues per year.
So we charge them 30, and then we give it back to them for economic development. I mean, that's what it's.
You gotta bring in the wind turbine too, it relates
Yeah,
to
that's
that.
true. Yeah,
So-
good point.
I think Pat can explain that perhaps best. So part of the sewer plant for usage, for example, relates to the wind turbine power. You have to have an outlet to say the sewer plant uses so much wind turbine power. That's what makes you comply with the agreement with Citgo. And you've got the guide here. These guys are the gold standard for electrical engineers. Blair knows this. He knows it. So if you want really technicals on that, he's been through this.
So in my perfect world, what I would say is you being the utility would send a bill to the city for their usage, just like everybody else. Then, if you wish to subsidize that or wish to not really charge that, then send a transfer over to cover that. And
So it's a wash.
that works well. That way everybody's treated the same.
Yeah, it's paper though, it's a wash, right?
It is,
Yeah,
it is, but at least you can't say, well, we're not
Sure.
charging somebody.
But,
Charging everybody.
yeah, I get that.
And that's how, that's the best way to do it.
And I know this isn't something you can answer now, and I know that there's constraints right now, but what's the lead time on this? I mean, design, order, everything else, what, a year to 2 years?
Design would go through this year. So we'd probably be bidding this, you can get the transformer right away. I mean, design, three months of design, et cetera. After authorized the final design, once we get through this preliminary phase, figure out a site location, that stuff can take forever if we don't have that dialed in. By the end of this, you could have this thing constructed by the end of 2027.
So first, so you want to do short-term borrowings or whatever until then, and then you do a bond issue that would be due 2029?
You could approach it many different ways. I've assumed, and then it depends, do you guys think you need to have construction bids in hand before they go to a bond issue? You're probably less likely to need to do that because you're using cash on hand. If you've got cash on hand that can be contributed, is in play, the perfect sizing of a bond issue is less critical.
And is this on a 20-year? Or is it that low
It's
interest?
in the bound handout.
Okay.
And
Sorry.
don't wanna, you might wanna let these guys finish.
Yeah, sorry.
So anyway, yeah, I mean, there's no free lunch here. I mean, if you gotta do the project and you have to do it, you gotta pay for it, and it's gonna
And I
take some.
said that at the last meeting, we do this larger project, you have to increase your rates.
And
That's, there's a
and
lot
we're
of,
talking 2%. I mean,
it's really 13, 14, 15 by the time we get to.
I don't think that's right with the way that.
So, we are focused, we're not, I know the franchise fee is real to people, that's completely right. What this rate study focuses on is electric utility rates you charge your customers.
Right.
If you go back to, and this is in the bound handout in this page right here, Exhibit 1. If you track back to 2017, look at the rate adjustments that took place in 2022, include the proposed adjustments. You're looking back 8 years to 2017, looking out 5 years forward to 2030. If you average everything out over that 13-year period, it's 0.9% per year. It's less than 1%. That doesn't consider the franchise fee, I acknowledge that. Electric user rates, isolated, are 0.9% averaged over that 13-year time span. I think that's pretty darn reasonable.
And I know our reserves are sitting well now, it's a
Yes.
question of, in years past, should there have been a steady increase in some commercial classes of 1% every year increase, leave your residential, or whatever those classes are.
However you wanna approach it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that, should there have been more planning in years past to set us up for this in 2017, to say, okay, we did this Band-Aid in 2017, we wanna do a substation. Should there have been a rate place on commercial at that point of 1 or 2% yearly, leaving resident, I don't know. And then you could tell you what that math would be.
That's ideal to do a rate
And it's not
adjustment
ideal
every
now,
year.
because here we are. I'm just saying.
So we're
But don't
dealing with
forget
what
the
we
rate.
can address from today forward. So, but I acknowledge your understanding, and I get that.
And the other
Didn't
thing
you
to
say Pinar
remember,
put a water, didn't you say Pinar put a water rate increase of 1% or 5% every year? Was it Pinar?
Here's what we're proposing, is that this 2.5% and 2% adjustments going forward out through 2030, those would be adopted all now. And so that's to your point, you would be taking, and I'm saying this to get you the best reception. For this purpose, we're not talking about the energy program, to get you the best reception in the bond market, adopt all 5 of those rate adjustments now.
So if I asked you what would those rates need to be on a commercial class versus residential, what would that? I mean, and I know you can't answer this now.
They could break that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you hold residential 0. If this was something we wanted to proceed, you hold residential rate classes at 0 and you look at other rate classes, like we've done with water.
Or maybe you do residential at 0.5% or 0.75%.
Something, yeah, just look at it.
In any world, hold it at 0.
Well, I'm just saying things that little template that showed the rate increases is pretty telling of,
It doesn't have to be the same across the board as far as classes. You can change, it can go up more for the,
We can't look at our expenses going up, employee costs, insurance costs, all these things going up, and then having to put in infrastructure and long-term have a sustainability of having 0%, unless we're going gangbusters in our revenue somehow.
well, that's the growth side, right? Then you hope the town grows.
well, yeah, that's a very excellent. This takes into all expenses. This is all, what expenses have done in the last 5 years. I mean, everything's gone up. And your power costs have gone up. So it's not just this project that's driving this, it's everything else in addition to that. I mean, so it's all, and so to only have a 2% increase, what else do we have a 2% increase in life? I mean,
And the perspective of a resident says, I didn't do anything different, I'm not using more
but
power,
it doesn't make any difference. You're paying more for whatever you buy at the grocery store.
and they're not happy about
Well, I know that.
it. Okay.
No, I'm not happy.
Well, no, I get
The
it.
point of
I'm
it
just
is,
kidding.
you can't, it's not possible to have 0% increases. It doesn't work.
but
The
honestly,
paychecks don't go
And
up,
this is the whole thing.
So.
the budgets,
They shrink.
yeah.
a couple percent though, for somebody like me, you're looking at a couple bucks a month.
But everybody says a
guys'
couple percent of
power bill
every
per month?
piece of life, that's all I'm getting at.
Just, what's a power bill for you guys?
$100, $200 a month, depending on the time of year.
200 some.
What's it
No, that's
average?
everything.
Everything, that's everything.
What's the power only? Is
Oh,
it?
About 150.
Mine's about 145,
Yeah.
but I'm home all day.
Okay, so that's $3 more a month if you look at 2%.
But you gotta look at these people that are, who are on a tight budget. Also. These elderly people.
Yeah, to me, I use the word steal, because if I'm not offering somebody more than I'm stealing from them, I'm taking more of the money that they have, and I'm not giving them anything more, right? So if I have to steal more of their money, I didn't do my job as a board member, because we should have thought of another way to do it or looked at other alternatives. And so that's where, if you ask a lot of the folks in town about they didn't ask for I know it doesn't make sense. They didn't ask for the growth, okay, that's true, they didn't ask, so why should their rates go up? Because the town grew, when, again, I go back to the 2017 time period, if there would have been a placeholder in there on a commercial basis, maybe that 4 million would be 5.5, I don't know, make it up. If we would have done the substation, hindsight's always 20/20, right? It's always 20/20. So what have we looked at this deep enough and studied it enough, and I'd say no, we're getting there, because we went from 7, now we're down to 5.
I think, first of all, we're trying to get the board to acknowledge you have to need to do the project. That's number one. Number two is, and the biggest piece that I can help you out with is how do you structure the debt? And that is so important, because you don't want to structure the debt payments to be massively higher than what you have now. So that's what we're trying really hard. Dang it, we're trying hard to
And in
make
that
sure
exercise-
this
in
not
that
have as
exercise-
much of an impact.
In that exercise and in that thought, we started talking about those other components and getting out there 28, 29. What is the board's thought on asking the city for any TIF capacity to help with this over time in the years that they would be available? And you're gonna know that, but that's just a question if they would consider it, not that they would do it, but just for analytic purposes, as we're trying to look at all these different sources. So does that help? And then you change the rate classes from residential and commercial on this increase. Does that help? All those pieces together in a low interest deal. What does that do to that 10% rate increase over 5 years? 15, 14.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll just touch on the revolving loan program that the Iowa Energy Center does quarterly. They award on a quarterly basis. They have $10 million per quarter to award to qualifying projects for infrastructure. Physical plant, I highlighted some of the bullet points. Physical plant and equipment for electricity, transmission, storage, or distribution. So what that is a 2% interest rate for up to $2.5 million in the project. You can cover up to 75% of the project, so you max this award out, okay? 2.5 million for 15 years at 2%, so it's cheap money. We feel that there's some good bullet points that we hit on with this project. We're aware of, we've been engaged with this application before. Some of the utilities kind of failed to provide adequate financial information, so they didn't qualify because they couldn't provide the information. So here we have all the
What is
information.
that? What was?
They couldn't even,
got
it was, I'm not gonna name names, but they
No, I
couldn't
didn't
even
mean that. I just
provide.
meant, do we have what you need?
Yes, we got more than what we need. I got a call with Lauren, Region 12, tomorrow to talk about this project. So I think we can look at, with the rate side of it, what the benefit is to the community. That's a big selling point for this, is that they want to see immediate ratepayer benefit. Something you can measure for us getting this award, this loan as part of this project. So just want to let you know, we do look at these things. These things are part of what we've got a task force looking at grants, like Chip Blair said, is getting grants for electricity projects. This isn't a grant, this is a loan, and this is the most realistic shot we have at some free money, I'll say that. Everybody wants free money, but unless you have what we've noticed is unless you have a very, we'll call it demographically diverse, green energy program tied to a project, you're not gonna get much for a grant, unless it's hazard mitigation or if your lines fall down because of an ice storm, then FEMA will help you out. We wanna avoid all that. You've got underground system, you can't take advantage of down lines, you don't have that problem here, but it's just tough getting grants from the federal government, especially now, as you guys are well aware. we don't bank on that stuff. Opportunities come up, we try to bring them up. So anyway, that's what we're gonna be working on here as part of this preliminary phase, that's all. We have the information we need to facilitate this, but we probably do need, by the time you're awarded something in August, we need to have the go-ahead that you're gonna do the project. Because if they feel like, you know, it's not gonna happen, they'll award it to somebody that's gonna do the project. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but I mean, just because you apply for a loan does not obligate you to take one, right? So I mean, if
yeah, that's true, yeah,
if we proceed with some of this design engineering, you know, that,
no, 100%.
and we apply for loan, I mean, and so Blair, in your analysis, I'm getting you guys are putting a lot of sand in these numbers, which is good for, you know, cushion, right? So you got cushion in your math, those rate increases, do they reflect the bond market rate and not the 2%?
Yes.
Okay,
From your March meeting, there's no way you were gonna get the Iowa Energy Program numbers for me. You didn't engage our firm to do that.
yeah, no, I understand, so that's what I was getting at, those
The
rate
bond market
increases
rates.
are, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's another thing, so you got, I'm just throwing this out there to think about, you've got potential ask to the city for TIF, if that would be available, and they would be willing to do that, on an analytic basis, not to, you know, let Chip go study that. And then what else are we talking about, different rate classes, and then the 2% factor on this low interest money, does that get those rates? Well, what's the main holdup, I mean, that everybody has, I know my number one is time, there's a lot of information here, and I don't wanna be rushed.
Is it correct that we can approve it with this rate structure and then over time work on, you know, next year, if we have the ability to reduce something or we find another way to increase the revenue or decrease an interest rate or get TIF or whatever the case may be, like, we can work over time to say, next year, we're gonna ratchet down what we've done with those rates because we can pay the debt off in a way that we don't have to increase it, keep that rate structure in a way that, this is a worst case scenario, but,
Yes,
and it makes it happen.
yes.
And it gets us the debt, to be able to get the debt that we need by approving it all now. But it doesn't mean that we have to have that rate structure over that 5-year
You
period.
could change it.
No, it's,
Hypothetically, you
I'm
can
with you,
change-
it's a
you can change
proposal,
your
but I'd like
user
to
rates
have
every
all those
month.
scenarios put together before even going anywhere, and the entire board understand it and be on the same page and agreement with the priorities and how things work and A, B, and C options. I mean, that's just me.
So outside of the capacity concerns that we have, you know, we're at 3.8 going, you know, looking at trending above 4, and that's a need for here. But even without the capacity concerns, our station here is 50 years old, right?
At least.
So
Yeah, it's 51, some of the stuff's
the
older, but
capacity issue is just,
it's one of them, it's one of the things.
it's just increasing, it's just reducing the amount of time that we have before we need to act. Like, we have to do something with that. I mean, just to Chip's point, like, first decide, must you act? And I think what's being explained to us now is we must act. And I mean, do you guys agree with that?
I don't think we have an option.
I mean, honestly, the longer we wait, the more it's just gonna cost more.
That's back to the
You don't
inflation
wanna-
discussion that you had in January.
And you
So
don't
I'm
wanna,
not at that point yet. I
you don't wanna do it when you're under the gun either, when the transformer's blown up and you're down to one transformer and then you better hope that doesn't die. You know, the longer you wait, the more risky it becomes.
I think we're at a good step of studying things, understanding the components and how things work, and then trying to put some math behind it. I don't think we have all the math.
What else are you missing?
Be comfortable, everything I just mentioned about 5 minutes ago.
Which is,
2%, different rate structures,
well, you
residential.
know what it's
commercial.
gonna be, if, worst case, which is reasonable.
Right, but we don't have the other ones laid out,
And it'll take a couple minutes to do that, it won't take long.
so.
Then we gotta wait another month.
You have the TIF option laid out. You have that.
My argument
And
is
remember to say,
what's before us isn't like 3, 4, 5% increases each year. It's small increases over time, which, yes, it is impactful, but it's something that we can work on over time. Again, what is it about the $5 million cost to replace this that we don't know right now? Are we thinking that we can do it for 3? Are we thinking that we don't only need to do part of it and not the whole thing? Like, what's the question here that's stopping us from wanting to move forward?
And another thing is, I mean, you could have anybody come in and do it, but they're gonna get the parts from the same place. Cause parts, well, there's an old saying, parts is parts, but the parts cost would never change. And as far as these guys from the EGR are putting it together, I know they brought it down. They're gonna zero that down and bring it down a little more if they can. But these parts
There's healthy
prices,
contingencies remaining in it,
these-
just because we're.
these parts prices will never get better. They're only gonna get worse.
Right, and as far as not wanting to raise rates, I mean, my opinion is those zero rate increase years, because there's always a little creep in your expenses every year. I mean, paying more wages. Those 0 years is what get you here.
Okay.
Zero rate increase years is how you get to where we need to make 2% increases 4 years in a row.
Devil's advocate, we use 40% of our reserves, we raise rates 14, 15% over a 5-year period, and we increase our debt load by 3 times. So I mean, that's the financial negative side of this. Do we need to do this? Yes. But this is just the tip of the iceberg of understanding from my perspective, whether this works or not. This is one way to skin a cat, but there's many others, and they're not in front of us. And so I'm not gonna be, asked to make that decision, like that. That's just me. And it's fine to disagree. I'm totally.
No, I'm just
cool with that.
I'm trying to understand the gap, like what's the information gap, so that.
He has to see the numbers for the 2% energy loan. You have everything else, Brian.
I think Kim hit it on the head when she said that we just did this franchise fee on the other side of the house, and I think we need to be clear about the fact of this project and, can we do this without residential rate increases? Nobody can answer that.
Well, I can answer.
No, I think
The answer is no.
Okay, so we can't, so
Well,
you're telling me we can't raise
rates
commercial?
on commercial.
Oh, yeah, okay, so I asked that, so we don't have that in front of us, right? We don't have that in front of us, right? Okay,
The total average is 2%. That's all you gotta
total
know.
average.
Where it comes from can be anywhere.
That's for us.
But what is the commercial rate needing to be to make the other one 0?
I can run those numbers for you.
Okay, but we don't have it tonight, so
We
there's
don't
no
buy
rush.
Brian, you can't get ready with them until you ask the question.
But we don't need to rush into saying, oh, we're gonna jump into doing this tonight. That's what it feels like we're trying to get to.
Okay.
I'm trying to separate the financials from the actual project costs that are expected to take place, like.
Say that again?
Does the project need to take place at $5 million?
Or it seems,
That's
yes,
the first question.
yes, it seems like that.
I think there's one question really answered honestly. We're all gonna be okay. How bad do we need to do that project?
I think,
We need to do it.
Well, how bad?
how
We
bad
all know we need to do, but how bad, how soon?
it's,
Because that's what the public asks.
So are
That's
other
like asking
towns
how
that
flat
have
is your
it older?
yeah,
That's what
50,
you can answer.
yeah,
You can answer
50 years is,
How soon do you need to do it? The public asked me that question.
Yeah.
And it's my job to ask you, how soon do you need to do it?
as soon as you hit that 4 megawatts, you're overdue. Like, you hit 4
Yeah, so
megawatts,
The answer is when is it?
That- that could
We
happen
have
this,
Is there a town with an older
Right.
section?
2.96.
So you know what you work with?
We need
there
to
are some-
simplify it.
7 years or not? That's calculated. So the spectrum of age,
So we're there.
50 years, I mean,
Okay,
you can't buy something that somebody says, that's good for 50 years. I don't have anything you can buy. I don't know of anything that says, somebody's gonna say, that's good for 55 years. When transformers, they've lived that long because we've squeezed them for what they're worth, right? So, a wind turbine lifespan, they say 20 years, things start going to pot after 20 years. You start having to fix stuff and
I think the question is like, if we weren't in a relatively good financial position, like, and we had to squeeze it out, like, how long could we sustain, does that, we're on 7 capacity there, 4 for this. So, and we only get close to that for a little bit of a year, right?
the
So-
warm summer months, yes.
Right. So in those warm summer months, if we're running only off of this one, because this one can't keep up, we lost the redundancy, but it's only for part of the year. Like, if we were really strapped and we weren't in a good financial position to replace this, what would your recommendation be for
The same,
it would be the same because like, I think you pointed out, you can't do zero rates in perpetuity because that's how you get into tough situations.
what are we doing up in Lakeview? How much, what are we saying for rate increases there?
Is it 15 a year?
15% rate increases over the next 2 years.
Because they did nothing for rates for 20 years.
Yeah, 30 and 2 years.
I'm doing the
I've
hypothetical.
got one
We
that's
have almost-
40%.
We had
Yes.
almost no
Nope.
reserves.
You don't want to be there.
It's, your guess is as good as mine, but if that transformer goes, when you apply more heat to a system, the opportunity or the risk factor increases. So it goes hand in hand. I don't have a crystal ball. I've seen some that are, I have not seen 70-year-old transformers. I've seen a couple 60s and they're in rough shape, leaking all over the place. So, I mean, you see all kinds of stuff because people don't want to spend money, but I'll tell you,
And I think some
you
of us-
guys are in a fantastic spot to stay ahead of the game.
I think some of us are asking the question because when the public comes and asks, our customers come and ask, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this now? Couldn't you have waited? We want to be able to explain back to them
100%.
That's
what
exactly
the
what
critical nature is
Yep.
of why we're having.
Critical
It's
nature.
50-year-old equipment that needs to be
And
replaced.
some of the
we
time,
need
if
to
you think
say
about this,
that to the public, because the public doesn't see it this way. He just don't wanna increase the rate. And we're having a hard time explaining that you need to do this because it's a 50 years old
Yeah.
substation.
Here's something can say to the public if you wanna avoid
Yes,
this. Your
yes.
water fund in 2015, water only had a negative fund balance. You don't want that to happen with electric. And that these guys have put a very thoughtful rate proposal in front of you. Average it out, again, not taking into account the franchise fee, it's reasonable if you average it out over a longer period of time. Factoring in those years when there's no rate adjustment.
Okay, so with the franchise fee, that's not factored in here. So you're saying like maybe for 26, since we have 4% franchise fee coming in, would we still have to raise rates in 26, or would that franchise fee cover it?
So it's the franchise fee,
On page 15, I'm looking at, for 2020, July 1, 2025, it shows a 2.5%.
the franchise fee cost savings, Blair's factored that in.
Okay, so
That's
that's
already in there.
So we still need to do another 2.5%. Okay,
It's factored in.
that's what I wanted to know.
so if we got 2030,
If I can just finish answering your question.
Yep.
It's factored in this sheet, with 1.5 million unrestricted reserves at the top, and that green shaded row at the bottom, that shows your cost savings from the franchise fee benefit.
That was just my question. We still need to do the 2.5%.
Yeah, we've
I want to make sure.
lifted up every rock, I think, with this.
so this borrowing, what did you say the total was? 2.8, is that what you said? Was proposed, it went down from 7,
2.8, yeah.
total project to 5.5, and that's phase 1, phase 2, is that right? Or 5.8?
5.1,
It's fine.
5.6 overall for
5.7,
everything.
5.7, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 1 was what?
4.8.
4.9, so
Okay,
because of
4.9.
the reserve factor, it drops to a 2.8 bond issue. So a 30% potential rate increase goes down to 14 net.
Where's the 30 come from?
If you had to finance everything that we looked at before, a simple amortization schedule over 5% in 20 years. What is our rate now, what do we need to pay
We're not
that?
doing that.
Well, no, I know, that's what I'm trying to say, is what's changed so the public understands that.
And how long is this debt for? What's the term of finance here? How long are we going out?
It's 20 years.
20 years.
It could be shorter.
Okay.
Let me get to your, so if you, there's 9.5. The rate adjustment done in 2022 is 3%, is that right, Blair?
That sounds great, yeah.
3% plus, I'm gonna piece this together. 3% 22 plus 9.5 plus the 4% franchise fee factor, that's 16.5%. I'm going back to 2017 because that's your last bond issue, and that's, I think before 2022, that's the last time there was a rate adjustment. So that's 16.5% divided by 13 years, that's 1.26% per year. I think that's defendable to the public.
That's less than anything else, I'm sorry, of my bills. And I'm one of those people that are on the fixed, pretty low income, but first of all, I gotta thank all you folks for spending the time diligently to thoroughly look through this. I don't think a public member that's sat in here, and I may be one of three that's sat through all these sessions with these people. So I know you're doing as thorough job as anybody in the public could ask you to do. I would be concerned to not do something thinking of the future people, not myself, but looking at the ability in this town to sustain what's needed. And I've sat through 3 of these. But I appreciate you looking at things so deeply. And I wish every bill I had was in line with what's happening here on the electric side. My life would be easier.
Okay, I got a question. Are you down, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay, I got a question. So it's gonna take, you said, like 1 to 2 years to get everything before we start, right?
Before we start
If we-
construction.
Yes.
So we'd start construction in 26 on the physical site, prepping everything. Probably install the transformer and the long lead items in 27 and finish that up. That's a
Okay.
rough schedule.
So if we would happen to get this loan, when do we start paying on it? When we get the loan or when it starts in 2026?
It's a good
It
question.
depends when you take out the loan, really. So you could issue the bonds. I'm, just
So
keep
it'll
it simple,
be in
I
August.
have to assume you do bond market debt, because
I'll
this
follow
other
that
program
question.
is just,
I have a call with there's talking about the program, sorry.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
program?
Yeah.
Maybe he's answering that. Maybe you
No.
know about.
So if you issue bond market debt, you could close anytime you want. The program is a different set of parameters, so, I know you wanna have every hypothetical explored and fully laid out. You can issue the bond market debt this fall, you could wait until mid-26. The key is, I think you can just issue the debt and probably not need to necessarily have all the bid components together on the project because of the cash element that you're kicking in. If you're strapped for cash, I would completely wait and do the bond issue only once you had bids in hand.
So is there anything else related to using so much of the reserves that we have more debt, we should have more of a reserve? Are we doing anything else
The debt service coverage ratio factors that in.
Okay, so
So that it's, if you look at in the bound handout, and I think folks don't want me to go through details on this. So exhibit 2, the 3rd page of the bound handout, that reviews the kind of the net revenue pledge and the flow of funds on a revenue bond issue. It's gross at the top, gross revenues of the fund. You first pay operating expenses, and this is how the legal covenants will be set out in your bond resolutions. First pay operating expenses, then you have net revenues for debt, then you have debt service payments. So it's taking that net revenues for debt divided by the debt service payment. You wanna have that about 1.4 times or greater to have the best reception in the bond market. Ideally, it'd be higher. I don't think you're gonna tolerate it being higher, because that means your user rates would have to be higher. So we're
So-
trying to be reasonable
So
to
if
balance
this
this out.
2% loan, if we're able to get that, then these numbers.
It'll be better, yeah. But the 2% loan will not, and that's outlined in the material, it won't be for the whole project. It's up to 75%.
Yep.
With the timing, if you wanna weigh in on that, that's helpful on the loan program.
Yeah, the timing, yeah, I guess I was just I have a call with Lauren at Region 12 about that tomorrow, that we can we're gonna go through some of the details, what she needs, but I have that noted to follow up with when does that loan kick in, when's it available, or when could you delay taking advantage of it, is it, the timeline things, I'll get more information on that.
But that one was for 15 years.
15
that's
years.
a cap on that, right?
So,
Yeah, 15
I
years.
mean, 20 years would potentially lower your annual costs,
So
so it wouldn't necessarily lower these rates.
I think, right,